All right, and we're back. It's going to be a long one.
So the first thing I want to say is everybody please just calm down a little bit in regards to the whole net neutrality issue. It feels to me that the level of emotion that's involved in this is way out of line with what we're talking about. The degree of regulation that we're comfortable with on the internet, whether we want the old framework that went from 1996 all the way to 2015 with some changes along the way, or the more heavy-handed Title II regulations that were put into place in 2015.
The big reason why everyone's so emotional about this is mainly frustration of continuing to try to deal with a government that does not care about its people. For example, it's a study came out. 70% of Republicans, 73 or 76% of independents, and 90% of Democrats all support net neutrality under Title II. Now, given that and the history of the really weird history of that whole comment period where like millions of comments from proven to have been dead people came up saying, I am not a robot. I support Ajit repealing Title II. Yes, I am real. And like that is insanely weird to me that a whole bunch of dead people just suddenly got like Facebook accounts. But onward, because there's a whole lot of points to address here.
So I've often wondered, why is it that people are so worked up, so emotional about this? And a lot of it seems to me like it was prompted by comedians like John Oliver. I mean, so I sometimes watch John Oliver and I think that he can be funny, but I keep in mind that John Oliver is a comedian and not a journalist. John Oliver gets a lot of things wrong when you go back and fact check him. In fact, I'd like to remind people of, John Oliver, way back when Donald Trump was considering a run for the presidency, he encouraged him to do that because he thought it would be a hoot.
There's not enough egg on that guy's face right now.
In fact, he said he would be the first one to donate to his campaign. And then, of course, Trump did run. And then towards the end, coming up to Election Day, and everybody thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win, well, then there was John Oliver again, taunting Donald Trump, offering him his Emmy if he would just take the bet that Donald Trump would accept the election outcome. Everybody laughed at this.
Rightfully so. No, yeah, hold on.
But you gotta wonder, who's laughing now, John?
Everyone else is. Everyone else is laughing at him because, yeah, the amount of egg on that guy's poor man's face right now.
I should probably point out that I didn't vote for Donald Trump and I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. I voted for Gary Johnson because he was closest to my own political opinions, even though he's imperfect and there were a lot of issues I had with him. But when it was the choice between the lesser of two evils, the worst candidate in history and the second worst candidate in history, I decided it's probably worthwhile to vote for a candidate that I mostly believed in, even though I knew full well he was going to lose.
All right, and for full disclosure, I had two different candidates. And when that fell through thanks to massive corruption with the DNC, I went with Jill Stein myself, even though I disagreed with all the stuff she had, but I was trying to get her to 5% of the vote. My hope was that she would get 5% of the vote, or Gary would, who knows. And basically, that would allow a third party to actually break through and get congressional funding for the next election. My vote was not a vote for this election, it was a vote for the future. But yeah, that's how I did it.
So for those of you who haven't seen my other videos, just real quickly, the Title I framework that existed from 96 until 2015 was called a light touch regulation. And really it was kind of a tag team regulation where both the FTC and the FCC were keeping an eye on what ISPs were doing, and then when they saw that there was a problem, they might investigate or get involved. And then what changed in 2015 is that we moved over to Title II regulation, which took the FTC out of the picture, moved it so that everything would go through the FCC, with the idea that with the more heavy regulation, ISPs wouldn't be able to get away with as much as people perceived they might have been doing back under Title I. So at the end of the day, I think we're talking about a difference in regulatory frameworks. Under Title I, it's more about ISPs interacting more directly with their consumers with oversight from both the FCC and the FTC, and that's what seems to have worked pretty well for the history of the internet. On the other hand, under Title II, it's all about the government, bureaucrats, and regulators deciding what is best for consumers as they see fit.
Yeah, because guess what? Sometimes the government has to step in and say, no, you're not allowed to block websites, even though you say you're going to block them. Like, just because they say they're going to block a website does not mean what they're doing is not incredibly shitty. And just because they're committing fraud doesn't... I don't know. Let's see. Yes, here. Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So if you're one of these people who takes as evidence this long list of things that ISPs have done in the past as a reason that we need Title II regulation, I'd just like to point out that all of those things on that list, at least anything from 1996 all the way until 2015, were successfully resolved under the existing Title I regulations. In a way, what you're saying is, look at this long list of all the things that Title I successfully fixed. I feel like you're almost making the case for keeping Title I because they were addressing these issues under Title I. Title II, the more heavy-handed regulation, may prevent those things from cropping up in the first place, but you need to ask yourself, what's the trade-off?
The trade-off is that, oh no, they're not allowed to squeeze out businesses that would dare compete with them before they're a threat to them. Basically, the argument here is that just because a company is allowed to choke out a small competitor and then get fined for it means we should go back to Title I. Now, I think that we should not go back to Title I, given their proven history of throttling, blocking, and fucking with the customers. Like my perfect little phone here, you can't use the FM receiver on it because Verizon, guess what? Blocked it! But yeah, under Title I, they'll get away with it for a while, and then they'll be, fined a little. Oh, it's a whole day's profit. Oh no! That's a whole $10 billion I've just been fined. It's a whole day's profit. What am I going to do? Yeah, I guess not make money today, but good thing there's tomorrow. Because, yeah, here's the thing. They're going to try everything they can. And they might get away with it for a while, but they might get away with it for a long time. And I don't want to know how many businesses were destroyed thanks to the ISPs doing unethical things. It's probably what was a lot. That's why I think we should stay where we were with Title II, where they couldn't even do it in the first place. Yes, it will.
I feel that a lot of the concerns about what may happen under a return to Title I are being hyped up. A lot of people are saying, oh, hey, ISPs are now going to charge you piecemeal for everything you're going to do. They're going to charge you for email. They're going to charge you separately for YouTube. They're going to charge you for Netflix. They're going to kind of bundle all these packages. And I just want to say, why do you think this? They didn't do it prior to 2015. And really, it's not in their best interest to start doing it now. What is in the ISP's best interest is to have packages that appeal to consumers. And so what they may offer is fast lanes for things like Netflix or for Hulu, and I think fast lanes are not necessarily a bad thing. There's kind of this packet envy thing that goes on where people are afraid that, oh, those packets are being shuttled by more quickly than mine, and that makes me upset. But if you think about it, streaming data, streaming a movie is more bandwidth intensive than is an email. I think it's actually a good idea to have some way to indicate which packets are more important that they get to the consumer quickly versus ones that it's okay if there's a little bit of latency or lag there.
All right, let me explain why that's a terrible thing. Basically, we know that they're not going to immediately come out with the charge per search thing that, like, for example, I don't know, spin the wheel, Verizon would want. What they're going to do is they're going to start far away, just quietly throttling things, quietly blocking things. And then they're going to move a bit forward to say, hey, you want to have access to all these extra sites super fast? And we're going to say, stop. They're going to back away. And then they're going to move further with it than they would intend. We're going to say, stop. They're going to move back to, all right, how about just this? How about we prioritize, I don't know, searches, and the main public will back off. Then they're going to keep moving forward and retreating, forward and retreating, forward and retreating, forward and retreating, but they're always going to be gaining ground slowly, inch by inch. They will not come out with that internet service, oh, you can only access these sites if you're part of this package deal immediately. It'll be like in 10 years when net neutrality will have been a shadow of what it is now. Furthermore, it's the idea that just because a company does something that's legal does not mean it is incredibly shitty and bad for the consumer. You know? Just because EA is the most successful company does not mean they're a good company, according to the public.
Something else that comes up frequently.
Oh, and Verizon has said they do want to do channel package style internet in court, I believe.
Is this comparison between the absence of net neutrality and how Portugal has structured their various internet services. As Snopes has pointed out, this comparison isn't fair, that it actually doesn't represent how things work. Portugal actually does have some net neutrality laws in place, but for a variety of reasons, as you can read in the article, it's not a good comparison at all.
All right, I'll take your word for it then. Let's see if you...
So even though it may be that you and I disagree on whether Title I or Title II is better for the internet, I think we probably agree as it relates to kind of the big three elements that are usually defined as part of net neutrality. The first one being transparency. Transparency holds up under both Title I and under Title II, and so there's no real threat to transparency even though we've moved back to Title I. The second is no blocking. I think it's important to remember that under Title I, there are very few, if any, instances of ISPs actually blocking websites or blocking content. You know, your ISP is a broadband provider. They're really just interested in the data packets that get served.
No, they're interested in making as much money as possible.
They really don't care as much about the content generally. They just care about the bandwidth, right? So historically, the ones who have been involved in censorship are a lot of the ones who've been on the Title II support side, you know, groups like Facebook, YouTube, which is owned by Google, Twitter, and all these guys have a vested interest in the Title II because they like having their data packets being pushed through the ISPs irrespective of how much bandwidth their particular content is pushing through. Blocking is not a major issue. The third one, and this is where I think people get all worked up, is on the no...
Here, I'll address your blocking point right now. Now, for example, in Google Fiber, they can throttle whoever they want as long as they claim it's for a fast lane deal. For example, Google doesn't like 4chan because 4chan is full of Nazis. Now, thanks to the fact that Google, being ideologically and financially motivated, can just throttle whoever they wish as long as they say they're going to. Furthermore, there's a difference between ISP content creators who block things on their own site thanks to ideological reasons, and ISPs who will throttle things through and announce they're doing so they don't violate transparency and do it for financial reasons.
Throttling, or the fast lanes, depending upon how you want to look at it. And we can see an instance of this in the John Oliver piece, where Comcast temporarily slowed down some of the traffic coming out of Netflix.
Illegally. They did this illegally.
As a way to bring Netflix to the negotiating table. We do know that there is a history of this.
Yeah, and now Netflix has to pay even more for the internet it was already paying for if it goes to Comcast customers. So how is that remotely good? They have to pay more to access Comcast customers, even though they already paid for internet through Comcast. Because customers of Comcast want to use a service, the company has to pay more for that service to that person, to that company. That doesn't make sense to me. If their internet is done through Verizon, would they also? This doesn't make any sense, honestly.
Yes. Under Title II, the idea was that everybody would have to move their packets through the internet at the same speed, that it would be regulated to enforce that. If you think of it like a freeway, as you've often seen used in various graphics, the government comes in and says, all right, there is no fast lane here on this freeway. Everybody's going to move at exactly the same speed. You can't pass anybody else. Everybody moves 45 miles an hour or whatever the setting is, and we're all going to just get there together. Under Title I, the opportunity exists for ISPs to provide fast lanes.
But unfortunately, I'm pretty certain that's not going to be the deal.
I know that there's been a lot of, well, they're going to make you pay for this. Well, they may make you pay for it.
No, they will. I'm sorry. I hate interrupting, but they will. Here, let's see.
But it's also possible that because ISPs are competing with one another for your business dollars, maybe we don't pass that cost on to consumers. Maybe it's just something that Netflix does as the cost of business.
So, you're in favor of them overcharging startup companies for daring to compete. Because let's be honest, the ISPs do not compete with each other. They act like cartels. They do not infringe on each other's territory. They do not move in. They do not try to steal customers from each other. If we had maybe 50 to 80 different ISPs in this country, then maybe you'd be right. But given the fact we only have like 3 viable ones, I severely doubt that.
Which is historically what has happened. These big content providers will actually strike a deal with their internet service providers to assure that their bandwidth usage is actually preferentially treated.
So now that Comcast is promoting Hulu and Netflix is having to strike deals with the other ISPs to be not throttled, because let's face it, they're guilty of doing that still. Now nothing can compete with Netflix or Hulu. There's nothing can come along and try to compete with them because of the fact that it's so much faster and better on those 2 sites. Exactly. There's nothing to stop them from doing this.
Under the new transparency guidelines that will be in place, the FTC, the ones who are advocates for consumers, have stated very clearly that an ISP that throttles may be committing fraud, because if they've made promises to their consumers that they will not throttle, that they have an expectation of certain bandwidth speeds, if the ISP then does throttle and the FTC finds out about it, well, they can get in trouble. So I think...
Except they're not going to, because they will have already gotten away with it. Now they just have to, little fine. Oh, we make more than this in a week, so little fine. The thing is, also, they can have it completely legal throttling if they say, from now on, we shall be throttling these sites. Which means they can't. And they're gonna. And then they're gonna say, hey, you want to have normal, non-dial-up internet speeds for these sites? Pay us more money.
I think because of the transparency law, the issue of throttling isn't likely to be a major problem.
I do not agree. All right. The only other value I can think of, let's see your point.
Also, as somebody who plays games, I like the idea that maybe an ISP will come up with some sort of program that says, hey, we've got a special thing now for gamers which reduces latency and lag so that your gaming experience is improved. I'd be willing to pay an extra $4 or $5 a month. Under Title II regulations, I don't think that this is an option.
This is pay to win. That is pay to win. I am sick and tired of all these companies saying implementing pay to win in games and just in internet service in general. God.
Under Title I regulations, it's something that we could at least consider, and I think that would be to the benefit of consumers. I think we should keep in mind that ISPs may offer various fast lanes without charging the consumer anything more, that instead they're offering them as a way to entice consumers to come over and use their service. We see this quite a bit now in the mobile space, so I don't see any reason not to think that they wouldn't also do it in the home space.
Except that they have a proven history of doing it. They're gonna. And now that you love this pay-to-win idea, that, oh, hey, $20 extra a month to even access multiplayer, because you know what they're gonna do? They're gonna lie. Because they always lie. Because you know what they're gonna do is they're lying to the American people, saying, hey, did you know it costs us so much more to run this PUBG game? Why do we have to do this? It's so taxing on our servers, slowing you down after throttling them. Now that lie is out there, the truth is still has to put out its pants before that lie has already made its way around the world. Now, here's the thing. Could it work? I highly doubt it, because they've proven to be abusive of this power. And in a response video you made later this week, which I haven't gotten to yet, gotten to respond to yet, you said that basically they would offer it for free, like here. Except, here's the thing. They do not compete with each other. This is an issue of them not competing. They're going to charge the consumers more because they know they can just press that little button as much as they want. They're abusive because of the fact that they have no actual competition. And yeah, this is going to hit the consumers hard. This is going to destroy the game market because of the fact that now indie devs, for example, you said that in your new video, game companies would make deals with these ISPs to basically be on their gaming fast lane, except for the fact that destroys the indie space, because indies don't have billions of dollars to throw around paying out the nose to ISPs. Top of that means if I'm on a Comcast network, let's take your utopian ideal. I'm on the Comcast network and part of this allegedly free thing on game A, but someone else is on the Verizon network and then they don't have it free. Verizon slows them down because they said they were going to without them paying out the nose. I will always have an advantage over them, no matter what. Or let's take your utopian ideal seriously. So game A with Comcast has the deal free to have super fast line. However, that same game does not have a deal with Verizon. So Verizon still slows them down because they said they were going to. So just because of the ISP you've chosen, you're going to lose the game every time because of the fact that Verizon slows down multiplayer matches according to their new policy, but Comcast doesn't with this game. And a second game that made a deal with Verizon to be super fast. So that game Comcast users will always lose due to the fact that they did not make a deal with Comcast. I was actually going to recommend this to you, but it seems you already seen it, I hope.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that PSA Sitch video. Probably about 30 different people have sent me that particular link. I've watched it. I've actually corresponded just a tiny bit on Twitter with PSA Sitch, and I think his video is, entertaining, very well put together. That being said, I think he's off on a few things. PSA Sitch really kind of just goes after Ajit Pai and makes him out to be this villainous figure, but I think that a lot of what PSA Sitch said in there wasn't quite accurate. For example, the number one thing that he says that Ajit Pai lied about was that Pai said the internet was completely unregulated before 2015. Well, I don't think Pai has ever said that. What he has said is that the regulations were light, and that
they were light and people were getting away with things rapidly.
Title II, they became much more heavy. So it's not a binary option. It's not a false dichotomy of no regulation and all regulation. It's a matter of degree. How much regulation are we comfortable with? And so when Pai talks about support of the free markets, he was talking about the sense that under Title I, free markets were allowed to operate more freely than they are under Title II.
And they abused this power, which is why we were forced to put them under Title II, because they kept getting away with shit. The courts ruled that they were allowed to, and that the FCC didn't have enforcement power unless they were Title II. That's what the video is all about, the fact that they were forced to do this. We were forced to go to Title II if we wanted to preserve net neutrality.
But he's very much aware of all the issues. In fact, if you look at...
He is aware, Ajit Pai is aware of the issues, due to the fact that he was one of the lawyers for Verizon. I'll address this point later when you get to it.
Ajit Pai's FCC article that he wrote announcing that they were going to look into the Title II regulations, he says very clearly that he wants to go back to Title I level of regulations, and that he feels that it's important to get the FTC involved once again. Also on the topic of Ajit Pai, it comes up quite often in my comments, notes along the lines of, hey, did you know he worked for Verizon? Yes, I do know he worked for Verizon. He was a lawyer there for a few years, and he hasn't tried to hide that. It's actually on his profile page. But what I'd like to point out is that, first of all, it's not that big of a deal if somebody works both in public service and in private service. It's good to be both sides of it. And that many of the other people who work for the FCC have also been on both sides of the wall. If you look at the current commissioners, one of them used to run a newspaper for about 14 years. Two others have also been lawyers dealing with communications issues. If you look at Thomas Wheeler, who was the chairman who instituted the Title II regulations, he was actually a lobbyist for cable TV for years before he came into the FCC. Having this experience in both the public sector and the private sector isn't necessarily a bad thing.
It isn't, but in Pai's case, it is very, 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 very obvious, given the fact that we had a whole bunch of dead people comment that they were pro ending net neutrality fully, and he's like, okay, even though I've been ordered not to hold the vote now, I'm going to hold the vote now. Even though 80% of the American people say don't do this, we're going to do it. It's so obvious he's not a public servant right now. The other people, you have a better argument that they're actually working for the people, for the American people. But it's very, 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 very clear in Ajit Pai's case that he is not working for the American people. It's just so obvious. He's acting like a corporate douche who's blatantly ignoring orders to stop votes that he then holds to do things the American people do not want. You know, a democracy.
Many big internet companies have been opposed to the Title I regulations and in favor of the Title II. But have you given much thought to why those content providers would be more interested in the Title II regulations? I mean, why would YouTube and Twitter and Netflix say, hey, we like the Title II thing. So let me suggest to you that that's actually in their best interest because they are the content providers. They don't have to build infrastructure to support high levels of content that they're pushing out. All they have to do is provide the content, and then it's up to the ISP to get it from them to you as the consumer.
The good thing the ISPs don't actually invest in infrastructure either then, because, they don't compete.
They like the idea that they don't have to work with ISPs to cut some sort of deal for their higher bandwidth requirements because the FCC has come in and said, hey, you have to treat all data packets the same. And so if Netflix is burning up all the bandwidth on this, well, it's up to the ISP to broaden their bandwidth to make sure it all gets through at the same speed.
Why is it under your idea Netflix is punished for being a successful company? If more people go to Netflix is going to eat up more bandwidth because customers are accessing Netflix.
And Netflix doesn't have to do anything about it. On the other hand, if you look at it from the ISP's perspective, they may say 80% of our bandwidth is over here being used by Netflix. Shouldn't Netflix be at least partly responsible for the bandwidth that they're using?
No, they shouldn't. You know why? It's because a customer says, hello, Comcast, I would like to go to Netflix.com. And then Comcast has to go, why don't you go to Hulu? Just go to Hulu. Just go to Hulu. Just go to Hulu. Under Title I. Now under Title II, they can't say that. It's this, yeah, of course Netflix is going to eat up bandwidth because it's really popular with customers. And again, I don't know what this has to do with anything, but
So another thought that has come to mind as I've thought about this is, do you guys remember back in about 2012 when there was all this hubbub about the SOPA and PIPA acts that were then being proposed? Now, these were acts that were supposed to help prevent piracy and protect the intellectual property of, say, music companies or films. There was pretty much a universal outcry for, no, don't come in and regulate our internet to try and stop piracy. I feel like we were all in agreement that that would be a bad thing. But then we come around to this new Title II regulation and a lot of people switch sides. Now they're like, oh, we were against government regulation on SOPA and PIPA, but we're all in favor of it if you're going to go stick it to the ISPs.
All right. Troy, let me explain this. Here. We're going to go even go big screen for you. Oh, dear. SOPA and PIPA were government regulations that were trying to be implemented that would allow massive corporate billionaires to run ramshot over the internet and virtually destroy it. Going back to Title I, even though 80% of the American people disapprove, is a corporate deregulation that would allow billionaire corporations to run ramshot over the internet and destroy it. That is why we support it so hard. Because of the fact that it's so obvious where the corruption is. Just like with SOPA and PIPA, it was so obviously written by the music companies to allow them to ban anything that they didn't like and just make a request to stop it. All right, but yeah, we're going to go back to small screen now. If you're wrong, it'll be too late to stop, unfortunately. That's why I don't want to jump out of the plane without a parachute of Title II.
Now, I've stated this several times that I'm very open to the possibility that I could be wrong about all this.
And I greatly appreciate the fact that you are open and actually talking to people. You've been very friendly on Twitter, and I appreciate that. And that's why I'm making this response video, hoping that you will get up to see it. And if you do, hi Troy. I may disagree with you on Anita still caring about video games, but I am still trying to make my way through all of your videos.
Maybe in a couple years, it turns out ISPs have turned into absolute monsters and we're completely in this ISP dystopia that everybody seems to be worried about. In that case, I'll be on your side and get Title II regulations implemented again. But at the same time, I don't feel like it's going to be necessary. I feel that with the transparency that has already been held up in the court of law, with the FTC back in there saying they're willing, ready, and able to investigate claims of fraud, with the FCC still in play, watching over things, I think that we're actually going to see a boom in the internet.
I really hope you're right, except for the fact that we just have to trust corporations that have a history of abusing power. That's that's a contention point, is this Title II stops them from abusing power. Under Title I, they're free to do whatever they want as long as they tell everyone what they're doing. And unfortunately, we're in an EA problem here, where EA controls all of Star Wars video games. Now all we have to do is hope that they don't fuck it up by being complete corporate assholes. Oh, look, hi, Battlefront 2. You ask us to trust corporations. I do not trust them because of the fact that they've been proven liars. I really hope you're right. But there's not enough evidence. Let's see your final thoughts.
So based on where we are right now, I'd say that the situation requires for some vigilance, maybe some cautious optimism. That
I would say extreme vigilance. Actually, yeah, here, if you can help. I don't know if I talked about it this time. There's a site called Swarmwatch. I can't really access it. I can't find it on Google for some reason. But they essentially put a bot into your computer, and it will help them track to see if you're being throttled. I can't find it again, I don't know why. It could just be coincidental. I'm willing to say that could just be a coincidence that I am shit at Googling things. But given the fact that they're there to track the transparency of ISPs, I honestly would not be surprised if the reason why I can't find it is due to a deal they cut with Google, ISPs cut with Google to, forget the site.
That things might get better, and that we kind of step back, relax a little bit, and as I would like to say, keep calm and game on.
I, again, really, really hope that there's not a single corrupt businessman in Verizon or Comcast or Spectrum for that matter. Because here's the thing. We need them to not be in order for your idea to work. But the problem is, again, mainly they have no competition. There's no angel investor with a startup that's going to compete with them. They're already too big. I have two choices in my area. Verizon, who has a history of throttling and blocking websites, and then having that stop under Title II. Or Spectrum, who has been found to be selling hardware to their consumers and lying about how fast it is. Both are shit options, and nobody competes with anybody. So even in the places where you have two okay choices, they both don't do anything to innovate. They don't progress anywhere. Because why should they? When they could just keep charging you more for progressively worse and worse internet in comparison to the rest of the world. I do hope you actually respond to me, because that actually would be pretty cool. I would actually be doing things on the YouTube. All right, anyways, I'm going to get this uploaded and then go feed my puppies. Bye.